introducing Lauren A. Hennessy and her talk, which will be on brain stimulation. And so here's just a quick introduction to Lauren. So she's a third-year PhD candidate at the University of Western Australia at the Perron Institute for Neurological and Translational Science, with a background in both psychology and neuroscience. And her research involves using a form of brain stimulation for treating depression known as low-intensity rTMS. This technique is painless, non-invasive, and can be used to help patients that do not respond to medications or therapy. Lauren's research aims to help us understand more about how the treatment works on a biological level, using a variety of means such as MRI, blood analyses, and collaborations with the hospital. More importantly, her research also aims to improve upon the current method already being used in clinics to make the treatment as effective and accessible for patients as possible. So that was just a brief introduction there. And I must let all of the high school students here know that rTMS is a very cool technique. I've had the privilege of being a patient, I mean, not a patient exactly, no, a healthy control in one of these experiments. And it's just amazing how you can use a technique which does not drill directly into the brain, but still allows, like, you know, for controlling the brain in subtle ways. So without any further ado, Lauren, take the stage. It's all yours.
Well, thanks so much. Hey, everyone. Hope you've been enjoying all the talk so far. And thank you for the introduction. So yeah, I'm basically a researcher in brain stimulation. As you just heard, I'm mostly doing things to do with a technique that I'll explain in a little bit called TMS. But there's a whole bunch of different types of techniques. So I'll go through a couple of them with you guys now. So I'm just going to get a PowerPoint up so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see this one.
Yeah,
right.
we're able to see it.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so basically brain stimulation. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about some different types of brain stimulation, some of the cool ways we can apply it, some of the cool ways we can use it, and all the different things that you can kind of see happening. So, as you've probably seen already today, you can do quite a lot of things with the brain. Among other things, we can look at it under microscopes to see the cells. We can scan it using things like MRI to get images of the brain. We can record the brain, so we can use techniques to measure things like brain waves or different chemicals. We can observe the brain through things like behavioral tests. And one of the other really cool things we can do, which I'm here to talk to you about today, we can. So the question is probably, how exactly can we stimulate a brain? So there's actually a couple of different ways you can go about it. The first is to use electricity. So you can use electricity, you can use it a couple of different ways. You can also use light to stimulate the brain, which is a really, really cool one. And the one that my research focuses on is using magnetism. So instead of using electricity, we can actually get magnets and use them to stimulate the brain, which I find really interesting. So on the screen here, these are actually only a few examples of each of these different types. There are actually a lot more of them, but these here are pretty much the main sort of ones that come up most often. Now, some of these are kind of a lot older. Some of them are a lot newer. Some of them are a bit more up to date, but many to go over if I try to do that today. So instead, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of these main types that are listed here. All right, so I'm going to start off with electrical stimulation types. So the first one here that I'm going to go into is called electroconvulsive therapy, also known as ECT. Now this type is one you probably might have heard of before. It's really popular in movies and TV shows. It's also called shock therapy. So in this type of brain stimulation, you place electrodes on the head, and these electrodes have a current pass through them, and that induces a short seizure. So back when this was first invented, the way that you've probably heard of it before, they didn't use anesthesia. So back in the day, way back when, the person would be awake and they would feel the seizure, and it was a little bit brutal. But nowadays, we have a lot more regulations in place, a lot more safety in place. And these days, patients are always given anesthetics. So usually they're a bit sedated, more put to sleep. And you also use muscle relaxants, so it doesn't hurt the muscles when the seizure is happening.
Yeah, I think it's frozen just a bit. Lauren, can you hear me? If you can, we're not able to see your slides move or hear you right now. Um, we'll just wait for a short while. Maybe it'll fix itself. If not, you can go ahead and switch off your video. That might help. Okay, I think we have Lauren back with us. Are you there, Lauren? Can you hear me? Yeah, we can see you again.
Sorry, guys, I think I disappeared.
Yes, just for a short while. We were on ECT, right?
Okay, cool. No, it's okay. I'll try it. That's okay. I might turn my video off for you guys just so we can make sure this is working still okay.
Sure, sure.
All right, so I'll put this PowerPoint back up. Sorry, guys, I'll try and be nice and quick. Continue. All right, so she'll be back. Yeah, so basically, electroconvulsive therapy, it's sort of more of the stronger type of techniques, but it means it does work really quickly, but we usually try different to this one. So I'll move on. So another method that uses electricity for stimulation is known as deep brain stimulation. So this technique involves implanting an electrode into the brain, and this is connected to an Encephalon wire, and it's connected to what's known as a pulse generator, which is used to send a current all the way through this wire and into the brain. So that then stimulates the brain. It's usually quite continuous. It goes on non-stop, and you can calibrate that to however you need to use it or how the person responds. So because you do have to use surgery, it means that you do have to undergo the surgery, but other than that, you can't really feel the stimulation happening. The most you might feel is a slight tingling in maybe the arm or the leg. Now, this was originally developed for Parkinson's disease to treat tremors, but it can actually be used to treat other conditions nowadays. And it's a popular one that's used for quite a few different techniques. So another one that's actually quite similar is called stimulation. Now, in this technique, instead of implanting an electrode in the brain, you actually implant the electrode in what's called the vagus nerve, which is this one down here. And again, that's connected by a wire to something that generates the electricity. Now, the reason it's put into the vagus nerve rather than the actual brain itself is because the vagus nerve is actually a really, really popular nerve that goes through the body that does a lot of different things. So it's a really long one. It goes from the brain down to the brainstem, through the neck, down the chest, into the abdomen. And it does a lot of communication with different organs. It has a really big role in the digestive system. It's involved in a lot of things to do with sleep and mood. So because it's involved in a lot, it means you can stimulate it to do quite a lot of different things. And again, like the previous type of stimulation, this one just goes on continuously. And again, apart from when the surgery happens to implant everything, you can't really feel it. You don't really know what's happening, which is nice. It's originally used for epilepsy, but it's also often used for things, and it can be really, really effective actually for these conditions, which is really nice. So the next method that uses electricity that I'll go on about today is called transcranial electric stimulation. This one doesn't involve any surgery. Instead, you just have these electrodes that you put on the head. You normally secure them with just like a headband or a strap so they don't move. And then you put an electric current through these electrodes. It's a low current, and that'll go through the electrodes. It'll pass through the scalp into the brain and stimulate the part of the brain. Now you can use this in a couple of different ways. You can use it to do quite a lot of different things, like I have talked about before in all the other types of stimulation. But because this one's more on the mild side, it means that we can use it while someone's awake. Because the electrodes aren't implanted, it means that you might be able to feel the electrodes a bit more with this technique. The electrodes might get a little bit warm, or you might feel a little bit of a tingling coming from it. But other than that, you don't feel any pain. It's painless, and it's nice and safe. So that's the last one I'll talk about today that involves electricity, but we have a couple of other ways we can stimulate the brain. Another one is called optogenetics, and this technique uses light instead. I think you might have a session on this afterwards, so you'll get to learn a lot about it in that one. But just to give you a nice quick brief overview today, this technique essentially just uses light to stimulate the brain. So basically what we do is we will genetically modify the brain cells or the neurons so that they can be controlled by just the use of light. So that's actually really cool. So the way we do that is we insert genes that are known as opsin genes, these ones here. And these genes will help to express proteins that are sensitive to light. So what you can do is then implant a nice little optic fiber here into the brain, and then that can be used to put a light on in the brain. And then by putting the light on, it means that you can actually activate those brain cells that you've genetically modified to respond to it. So in electrical stimulation, where the stimulation would normally just activate everything within its reach, it means that if we're just using genetically modified brain cells that respond to light, we can actually choose very specific brain cells that we want to activate and leave the other ones alone. So it's nice and really specific. It's a nice and new technique, which is really cool. But the one thing is that at the moment, it's mostly just used in animal models or in cellular models. We don't really use it in humans yet. But that's, I'm sure, coming down the track when the technique develops a bit more. And because we use light, we don't have to do anything using electricity. So it means that you can't actually feel that it's happening, which is always a positive thing. Now, the last technique that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is using electromagnetism or magnets. At the very start, the one that my research is on and one that I'm really interested in using. And it's called transcranial magnetic stimulation. So this is a great technique because it uses magnetism, and you can see a picture here of a person getting the treatment. So basically the way this one works is you have a coil, which you can see here on top of a person's head. This coil is made up of lots and lots and lots of copper wire. So if you place that coil on a person's head and you turn it on, you can pass an electric current through this coil here, and that electric current will actually create a magnetic field around the coil. So what happens when you apply a magnetic field to something that conducts electricity, such as neurons in the brain, is you can actually induce an electric current down here that actually happens in those neurons in the brain. So this will make them fire, this will produce activity in areas of the brain, and you can target the place that you want to stimulate. So again, you can move the coil around, you can target different areas of the brain depending on what you want to hit, and it means you can use it again for a variety of things. So the other positives, because it uses magnetism, means we don't need to do any surgery. We can just have someone sitting there nice and comfortably in a chair. It's painless. The most you feel is sort of a tapping sensation on the head. And at the moment, it's mostly used for depression, but you can also use it for things like OCD, pain from migraines, and other neurological disorders. So as you might have gathered by now, brain stimulation is often used to treat neurological disorders and psychological disorders, which is a really, really valuable thing that we can do. But the other things that we can do with it are we can actually use it to diagnose those issues in the first place. So if someone has a health issue, you might, for example, stimulate the brain or the spinal pathways, and you can test if they're actually working properly. If they're not working properly, that might then indicate, oh, okay, hang on, something is going wrong. So it might show you that something is happening that is not quite right, and we might need to treat that. The other thing it's really, really popular for is for doing research. So we can obviously do research into how to use it to treat things and how to use it to diagnose problems, but we can also just use it in general to see how the brain is working. So you can get someone to do an activity or do a procedure on them, and then you can apply brain stimulation before and after that and see how exactly
Hi, Lauren. I think we've lost your voice for just a short while. If you can hear me, just pause for a minute. We'll. Okay, yeah. Can you hear me? Looks like just had a small disconnect. Took it fine in a short while.
Sorry, again, I changed my side. Hopefully it works.
Yeah, no problem. So we were on one of
Can you
the.
see me again?
I can't see the slides yet. It should be up any moment now. Yeah, I can see you now. So it just froze a bit into your last slide, the one which you were presenting.
Okay, that's good. Yes, so basically we can use it for a whole.
You can stop your video, right? Yeah, okay.
Out, guys. And basically, you can use to treat disorder, you can diagnose, you can use a whole bunch of research. A lot more and go into everything, but just a bit of a to main ways that we can use it. To finish off, you're wondering if we're actually stimulating, not actually doing anything. So usually to know that you can do a couple of things. Treating a disorder, disease, you might check how to change it.
The audio is
for the brain itself.
Yeah, Lauren, we just have audio lag issues. Can you hear us? Yeah. Anyway, I think Lauren was saying that she's reaching the end of her presentation, I guess. So this is one of.
Just you can see you look at the brain, people, and you can also the cortex and give you an explanation. The cortex is a brain that's involved in and to do with the body. So the cortex is if we want to we can the motor actually cause the muscles to move, which is really to see. Now, that probably work if it's not going to, but there is. If you guys want to write it, and you can see it.
Yeah, it's getting really difficult to hear exactly what you're saying, but I think yeah, it got a little better towards the end of that paragraph. Could you try just say a sentence again?
Yeah, let's see how the brain stimulants work. You can look at themselves, but stimulate a part of the brain that's involved in motion movement, which is the motor, and part of the brain you can activate.
Sorry to interrupt you again.
The part that controls you can move.
Yeah, Lauren, is it possible for you to connect to your earlier connection? If you don't mind, I think that was working better. We can just try that once and hopefully there won't be any issues with the audio in that. Yeah, sorry about that.
And so sorry guys. All right, I should be back on the other connection now. So
Yes,
hopefully that
this is
works
much better.
better. Okay, cool.
So just a quick
Yeah,
introduction.
just a quick summary of what I was just saying. So third time lucky, if we stimulate the motor cortex, which is the part of the brain involved in motor movement, we can see that stimulation happening in action. We can stimulate a part of the brain that moves, for example, the arm or the leg, and we can actually make the arm or the leg move. There is a video that probably won't work over this connection, but if you want to take note of this little hyperlink here, if you guys want to see an actual video of how it works, I encourage you to have a look at this YouTube video, or alternatively, just Google search TMS, and you can actually see, if you stimulate a person's motor cortex, you can see them all moving, and it's really quite exciting to see. So yeah, that's all from me today. Thank you for bearing with me. I want to thank everyone at Project Encephalon for their amazing initiative, showing all the amazing things we can do in neuroscience. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any